we are getting set for the final game of, the women's friendlies here to end off the year. But more importantly, we're going to get into it in just a moment, Christine Sinclair. But I do want to look back to Friday's match that was in Langford inside Starlight Stadium, the home of Pacific FC for the Canadian Premier League. It was a 5-0 victory, Ollie. I have mixed emotions. I don't know how you're feeling about it, only because the Canadians did what they had to do. The team that was put in front of them, the Australians who were put in front of them, they took care of business against them. At the same time, we know that it was the Australians' B team. So we would like to see some stiffer competition here as Bev Priestman is still trying to get her team ready for the Olympics. What were your takeaways?
Well, they played well, regardless of the opponent. You do have to account for that. Obviously, none of those players in the Australian starting 11 played in the World Cup game or started in the World Cup game against Canada. So it certainly was not the strongest Australian team. And you saw the big names, obviously, with the omission of Sam Kerr, who's out injured, come on in the second half. And I'm sure those players will start and it'll be a much different lineup on Tuesday. So Tuesday is going to be the bigger test. There's no question about that. But I think at the same time, Canada hasn't been perfect against kind of lower ranked teams. If you want to make that comparison over the past couple of years, we've seen plenty of games where they've kind of labored to victories, haven't looked particularly fluent in the final third against those kinds of teams. And this was a lot better in that regard. It was 5-0. It could have been more. Certainly could have been more than 2-0 at halftime. I thought they had 3, 4, 5 good chances in the first half. So there were definitely positives to take, I think, regardless of the caliber of the opponent in front of them. The big one for me, and it's not just this game, but I think over the past few games now, is that they look like they have their number 9 in Nichelle Prince. And that's a question we've been asking for 2 or 3 years as Christine Sinclair has obviously got a little older and maybe played a bit deeper over the past couple of years, is who's going to be that replacement? Is it going to be Heitzmer? Is it going to be Vienne? Is it going to be someone else? And right now, Prince, to me, looks like the outstanding candidate. She's definitely a different player to Sinclair. Firstly, just physically a lot smaller. But she's quick, she presses. Her link-up play, I think, has been really, really good, surprisingly good for a player who's mostly played on the wing and maybe isn't used to playing with her back to goal. And she's starting to show some finish as well now to add to it. So that, for me, has been the big positive since the World Cup, is seeing the way Prince has returned from injury and made that number 9 spot her own.
It's kind of sad to play the what could have been game at the World Cup because, of course, we know Janine Becky was injured, but also Nichelle Prince coming back from an Achilles injury. Yeah, but she wasn't fully fit, and it kind of goes, what could have been. But we are seeing the Nichelle Prince prior to that injury and the way she's playing, and I think you're right as far as solidifying a number 9. And I know, Jordan, you were honing in on Simia Wujo, who gets her first goal for country. And in that midfield, it seems like Bev, if she wants to put an attacking lineup out, has found her attacking midfielders.
Yeah, I think you could say that, honestly, Andy, looking at this team play, that the Wujo, Fleming, Grosso, attacking midfielders, they're abundant and they can all play a role. But I think the deficiency still lies with someone to really break up play and have someone to hold or an outright 8, a box-to-box midfielder, which you just can't get away from in this day and age in the modern football game. Looking at this Canadian team, I think all around, if you just drew a circle, so if you're going through the back line, you go to wing backs and you come to strikers, you feel pretty confident about it. It's really that nucleus right in the middle. That's not to slate any player. That's just looking at what a team needs. You need every game, you need someone to go and win tackles and really just allow players to go forward. And I don't think Canada really has that. I think they had it in Sophie Schmidt for a majority, someone who is confident in their position, reads the play well. But I think going forward, if you're looking at Gold Cup, if you're looking at any tournament that, if you're looking at Olympics and the tournaments that this Canadian team is going to face, they have to find players to play that role. Maybe attacking is what they do well, but we need someone in that midfield to play a more defensive role. And Quinn can't be the only option. There needs to be someone else partnered with them to go and really, really break up play. But there was a lot to like. Obviously, 5 goals. That's an area that I've been saying that they need to go and attack. But just thinking long term, that nucleus in the middle, I think it needs to be addressed.
And Wheels, you continue to get what you want with Ashley Lawrence playing further up the pitch.
Yeah, honestly, there's not much to take away from this game. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but let's be honest. This is a Christine Sinclair celebration tour. One thing I know for sure is Bev Priestman is not sentimental. It's very awkward seeing Christine Sinclair not start these games, even though everyone that's showing up, all the fans that are showing up to these games are there to see Christine Sinclair. And
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry,
what is she supposed to do?
I am a traditionalist when it comes to football. If you're going to pay tribute the proper way, you have the crowd applaud them off the field, not on the field with about 10 minutes to go. I don't know. It's nuts to me because Australia is clearly, to Ollie's point, they played 2 players from the start in this game who featured in their semifinal tie against England in the World Cup. Like, it's not a serious game. Like, it really isn't. I know that Priestman can justify that it's building towards next year. She's still figuring things out, and she is. I'm not trying to take away from what Bev's trying to do here, because clearly she wants to play the 3-4-3. She has her 3 players at the back locked in. If Rose, Jill, and Buchanan are fit, all 3 of them are playing. Collins, I'm not sure if there's depth behind her on the left, but she fits the system. Lawrence on the right. 2 central midfielders. I kind of disagree with Jordan. I think that you can play more attacking players when you know Canada has a defensive formation that they can rely upon, and potentially finding a solution at the number 9, which has already been discussed. But in terms of overall performance, how good, like, we know that Canada can beat bad teams. Like, we do. We don't know how this formation is going to stack up against the best of the best. And that's what Canada needs to figure out to make the jump. So you're not going to figure this out even in this next game. You're just not. There might be a better Australian team. There are some players in the squad that are much more accomplished than the players that we saw last week. So we'll see. I just need Christine Sinclair to start the game, please. It's Sophie Schmidt. Just start the game. It's her last time. It's the last game of the calendar year. I mean, come on. Like, you saw the strength of the opponent last week. They just give the people what they want. Like, it's going to be a massive crowd. You named the stadium after Christine Sinclair. Start her in this game, please.
She's gonna start. I don't think, that's Bev Priestman's talks about her leading the team out for one last time. She's going to start this game. There's no question.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, because obviously, Wheels, we've been saying this all along. There's something different about coming onto the field versus coming off the field when everyone knows it's about to happen and everyone gets the standing ovation. You see them walk off. So I think she will get the start. But I do kind of believe Bev was, you're in a pickle, right? Because you have these 4 games and you're trying to get, even younger players into the game. Latifa Abdu, we saw her get in as well. Like, we know that Bev really wants to use this window to formulate something with her team. So she is a bit of a jam. To your point, though, that doesn't mean she can't start Christine and bring her. Oh, I get that, but she's obviously chosen to go the opposite way. That'll probably be different on Tuesday. Speaking of Christine Sinclair, this is it, guys. 24 years she's been representing the national team, and Tuesday's going to be her final night in what is now called Christine Sinclair Place for the night. She was at a press conference on Monday, and she was asked about the future of the women's national team.
Look, I think if there's one thing that in Canada we need to work on is like the pipeline to produce and develop like the next generation. I hope that, like, I look at like a Jessie Fleming, for instance, like I hope she gets to 300 caps because she's like that talented and that driven. But at the same time, I hope she doesn't, because that would mean that we've produced like the next generation of young soccer players. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think, like Soph mentioned, hopefully with a professional league coming to our country, it will, I think, start to address the lack of a pipeline, the lack of a pathway for young Canadians to reach the national team. I think for a long time in Canada, players have reached the national team by chance instead of design. And yeah, hopefully in years to come that will change.
Ollie, I'll start with you. How does that change?
Well, that was an interesting question, because it was an Australian journalist that asked it, and he basically asked them, like, do you think it's a good thing that there's 550 caps or so sitting on that stage? And Sinclair, far from being, maybe offended by the implication, actually seemed to agree with it. Like, is it really healthy for a player to have over 300 caps for their country? And does it maybe show that there hasn't been someone to come and take her place? And you kind of heard her answer with regards to maybe the next player who has the chance to do that in Jessie Fleming. So how does it change? I think it's simple, or not simple, but I think the most obvious answer is simple. And Sinclair touched on it at length in this press conference as well. It's professional clubs in Canada. We can do things at the national team level in terms of the youth teams and development centers and things like that to help develop the next generation of players. But I always think, you look around the world, as important as those national programs are, it's really driven as much as anything by clubs and having coverage across the country, having opportunities for players in all of the different kind of areas of the country. And then having that ability to not just develop them through their teenage years, but to give them that, firstly, the ambition and then the opportunity to go and play at the professional level as well. So Project 8 is obviously going to be a huge part of that. And like I said, Sinclair spoke about that at length as well as Sophie Schmidt as well.
I'll say this before I go to you, Jordan. I mean, somebody of Christine Sinclair's talent, I think it's not surprising we see a lot of caps, but she did make me think with that answer, because we did get to a point, Jordan, oftentimes even on our show, where we said, like, well, who's going to be the next? Because you just know Father Time is undefeated. And we struggle sometimes to come up with those answers. So she brings up a valid point. Like, I think someone of her caliber, the longevity doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, she makes a valid point in, like, well, who's next in the pipeline? And we don't really know how to have those conversations because we don't know who's in the pipeline.
Yeah, the who's next, obviously that's Christine Sinclair looking at another player maybe to get 300. But I think also too, when you're looking at the situations, maybe not, you're trying to get one or two players to go and get 250, 300 caps. It's getting classes to come up, right? So I would rather split that and have 3, 4, 5 players get 100 as opposed to one player going and get 300. For me, what I'm trying to say is it goes probably back to grassroots. And this is a bigger question because I could sit here and talk to you guys about, it needs to be prioritized that from U8 football and U12 football, kids are playing and there's a pathway growing up. Everyone knows a league would absolutely help. You see it with the CPL, how it's helped just having something where there's a middle ground before you're trying to go to a national team or play other places. You could play in your own backyard. But I think it's even further than that. I think there's talent in Canada from U8 to like U12, absolutely. And then it gets foggy. U12 to like U18, it's if you could pay more, maybe you're getting more coaches or trying to do academy stuff. But this is such a big and rich country. And if you look at soccer, the way that it's played and the amount of clubs that we have, it's so minuscule. It's so finite. So I think that's a bigger issue. And again, I'm not saying I have all the solutions, but I think that needs to be addressed in terms of what happens when you get to your teenage years in football in Canada. Because I don't think, I think it is a bit of a luck. A Jessie Fleming, I think there are more of Jessie Flemings in Canada, but I don't think they're being seen. I don't think the pathway is really advantageous for players to go and succeed here. So I think that needs to be looked at. And then hopefully in years' time, you can see more players getting more caps. But I think that little gray area needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but there are good young players coming through this Canada team. So we shouldn't ignore the fact, I know that's not what Christine Sinclair means when she says that, but Jade Rose, excellent player. Jessie Fleming, Awuja, good young players are coming through, perhaps not at the volume that you would like, but this isn't just a Canadian problem in the women's game. It's a universal problem. A couple of countries, Spain, England have improved a lot more in recent years. But this is a problem with the pipeline. In this country specifically, I don't want to deal with the global problem in the women's game in terms of overall development. But in this country, whether it's the women, whether it's the men, there needs to be cooperation in this country. People just keep on fighting with one another and operating on islands. That's why things like League One across the country in the men's game, things like this are crucially important in order to develop that pipeline. The women's game is even further behind that, but we need to get our act together. Players are still negotiating a CBA. Well, the majority of the money that the Canadian Soccer Association brings in would then go to the players. The CSA needs to look after soccer in this country in its entirety, and they need to rely upon the provinces and the member clubs after that. There's a lot of individuals and a lot of people that need to get together and start working together in order to produce that. And to that question that was raised by the journalist, I have no problem with Christine Sinclair having hundreds and hundreds of caps because she's a unicorn. She's an
Yeah,
absolute
exactly.
unicorn.
That's what I
Like,
meant.
that's
Yeah.
like, well, it's a generational player, right? It's like when you have mediocre players picking up too many caps. And really, in this Canadian team, we're looking at one position where there's been a significant void behind Christine Sinclair. It's the attacking position. Who's going to score? Who's going to fill the big boots that are going to be left behind by Christine Sinclair? That's not an easy one to fill. But across the board, this program continues to develop very good players. It might be by accident, but the CSA spent a lot of money giving Canadian players, allowing them to play in the NWSL, paying their salaries for the better part of a decade. Like, there are people and there are operations that are going on in order to provide opportunity. Is there enough? No. Can everyone do better? Yes. But people need to come together in order to make that happen.
This is a conversation we're going to continue to have for years to come. And it's all about the ecosystem of the soccer world. And you're right, Wheels, because League One is growing between Ontario, BC, Alberta, like it's Quebec, it is spreading. But to me, it's like, so where's the connection there? Where's the connection between League One and the CPL? Will there be a connection between League One and a women's domestic league when that launches? Like, who's feeding whom? How is it going up to the top level? Like, it all needs to come together. People need to work together.
Just really
right?
quickly, just look at Australia, what they've done domestically, how they're providing opportunities, but there's synergy between the men's league in that country professionally and the women's league. The same
Yeah.
clubs, resources are allocated across the board. Here, I mean, I understand what Project 8 is trying to do, but it'd be great if there could be a more alignment through the Canadian professional club structure across the board so they can piggyback off one another and take advantage of the limited resources that we have in this country.
All right, so now it's all about the future. How does the future look, in particular for these two players? And this is what Sophie Schmidt and Christine Sinclair had to say.
It's a question I ask myself often. Definitely going to be involved in the game in some regard. Like Sinky said, it's important to give back to the game. It's given me so much in building who I am and just the life that I've lived. But yeah, definitely involved in some capacity, if that's coaching behind the scenes or whatnot. Who knows? There's a league coming to Canada, so that's there too. And D's in the back of my mind, just being like, hello. But yeah, soccer will be a part of it in some way, and I can't wait to give back and influence girls in a different capacity.
Yeah, I'm very similar to Soph. Haven't quite figured it out. Hopefully playing another year down south, but I'll stay involved in the sport. You know, it's been my life pretty much since I was 4. So whether that's helping Dee in her league, whether that's coaching, we'll see. But I'll definitely be involved.
You know, when Atiba Hutchinson announced his retirement, John Herdman was very quick to say, Canada Soccer better nab him and have him be involved in some way, shape, or form, because you don't want to lose that kind of soccer mind. So there are so many different avenues for former players to get involved in the game. Obviously, coaching is pretty obvious. Broadcasting, our little boy Jordo there. And perhaps even with the federation, which a lot of people have been calling for former players' voices be involved in the development of soccer in this country. Wheels, how much importance do you put on that?
Well, it's hugely important, but it's not something that has translated over the years. Of course, you want more former players involved, but in what capacity? And what are they willing to sacrifice? Because it does require sacrifice to work or take part in soccer in this country. A lot of the jobs and the roles are volunteer. The board of directors, which there's been open calls for more players to become involved. Just one former player is on the board in terms of people who represented the national team. Brittany Timko Baxter. That's it. Coaching in this country, if you want to get your badges and work your way up to be competent enough to coach at the highest level, you're making what, $30,000 a year? Like it's a grind and it requires sacrifice. And oftentimes players say that they want to play a bigger role, than whether it's the politics involved or the salary involved or other opportunity that might be more lucrative or better for them and their lifestyle comes about, then they'll turn and make that decision as well. So it's a very personal one. I don't blame former players when they don't, become involved. And I really applaud former players when they do become involved. So hopefully, those two, Schmidt and Sinclair, like, of course you would want them involved in the game of this country, but life moves fast sometimes and you can forgive them if they decide after committing their entire beginning of their adult life to the game. If they wanted to go do something else, that's fine too. So there shouldn't be pressure. But just understanding that we're still very much developing this country as a soccer country. And it's not easy making that transition to work in the game and actually make a salary that you can live on, to be quite honest with you. And that's what we're trying to build here. And hopefully there is more opportunity going forward.
Yeah, how's that paycheck, Jordan? Now that you're in the broadcasting world,
Like my millions, I have a few penthouses like Ollie. No, Wheels is right. I think though, what I will say, as a guy who used to kick ball a little bit, it's nice having the ecosystem of someone who's been there, right? But I do agree with Wheels tenfold that you have to have a mindset for it, right? Because it is a grind. It is different. I think even when you talk to young players, it's all decorated about how much you can get playing. Like, hey, like, oh, this flight or this much money or whatever. But it's such a short career, right? Like there's only a handful of percentage of people where they go and play for 5-10 years and they could be set for the majority of their life. The average person, you're always going to be out of football longer than you're in it. And so I think having people that were in it for a moment have a taste of what it takes and can push it forward. And a country that we all love in Canada, I think you need those staples. That's not pressure on them, but that is an advantage that they could bring. But yeah, it's humbling themselves, understanding that you'd have to be a bit steadfast as well, because that is a grind. It is different. Playing is the easy part. I think connecting people together, and also in this climate, I'll say it in Canada, where Wheels is so right. You know, it's my posse against your posse. If it was a bit more collaborative, it would be easier. But we need players like that who have been through it, who are tried and tested to be a part of the game, because that's the only way that we're really gonna see things come together beautifully. So I hope those two players are involved.
Yeah, you got to find the ones. Look, they'll be involved in some capacity, I'm sure, going forwards. But you have to find the ones who really, really want to do it. So it's all the points that the guys made before. And I'm not criticizing anyone who doesn't feel that they're, they want to go in that deep in terms of really being involved in the Canadian game in a coaching capacity and an administrative capacity or whatever the case may be. I think it is important for Project 8 to attract some of these names because they are so recognizable, and I think they would provide kind of a face to these teams that people know and can connect with. It'll be interesting to see whether some of them decide to maybe give coaching a try in a new Canadian league that comes up, whether they could be more involved off the field as GMs, as or whatever the case may be. Or even if some of them, because these two players, I don't think Sinclair will do it, but if these two players are playing for another year, if they decide to maybe extend their careers slightly and actually play for a Project 8 team in a couple of years' time, that would be an interesting one to see as well. So we'll see, but it's obvious that it's important they continue to be involved.
Well, I flat out asked Christine about that, and she said no. She said she'll lend her voice maybe in some way, but she kind of she just said no. I will not play in Project 8. So who knows though about Sophie Schmidt? But to your point, like their faces alone can lend a lot of value to that league in getting people to come out. So we're looking forward to that game on Tuesday right here on One Soccer, the final game of Christine Sinclair representing the Maple Leaf.